Hi, my name is Teddy Caputo. I'm 24 years old and I am an assistant curator at the Berman Museum of Art. What is a curator? I think that the term curator can be, or the profession of curator can be difficult to define because it's such a broad idea. Curating can be making a selection of objects for display. However, curating doesn't necessarily have to be in an artistic context. There's curators at history museums, anthropology museums. Librarians are curators. So it's a very versatile role. And what you curate doesn't have to be a physical object either, especially in an art museum and in a contemporary art museum. Artists work with light, with sound, with time. In the 21st century, the idea of what constitutes an art object is as broad as it could possibly be. To me, curating is making an argument. You come up with a thesis that you want to argue, and you use the art objects as evidence for that thesis. I don't think that curating need be objective. In fact, I think it shouldn't. Otherwise, we wouldn't have curators. We would just have objects on walls. Everything is a choice in curating, and every choice means something. How did I start doing this work? I kind of stumbled into museum work. Well, stumbled isn't the right word. I did not seek out working in museums. Museum work found me. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, so we didn't have, we had a big art community there, but not necessarily lots of art museums. I went to history museums growing up. The Museum of Northern Arizona is more of like an anthropological museum, but I always liked them. And when I came to Ursinus, I fell in love with the Berman. I loved the art they showed. I had never seen, or I had seen contemporary art before, but it had never piqued my interest until college. And I took museum studies here. I co-curated a show with 11 other students, Deborah Barkin, my professor at the time, and the Berman's former curator, Ginny Kollick. So that kind of piqued my interest, and I applied to work at the Berman. I was a desk worker, and I wanted more responsibility, but I thought it would be more collections-based because our collections manager at the time, Julie Choma, really stewarded students. And I did take on small collections projects, but I was mentored by Charlie Steinbach. I helped with exhibition research. I was given a summer project to curate a show about the avant-garde in the Lenfest Gallery. So that was like my first curating project that I was responsible for, and I took on many others from that starting point. But I graduated, and then I was sort of grandfathered into working here. I was a good fit. I know the collection well, and I haven't looked back since. What do I like most about curating? I like when it ends. I don't mean that because I want it to be over because I don't like it, but because I love to see the finished show. It feels really good. But I like the process too. I guess my real favorite part is like the very last second before a show is done. I love the labor of working on exhibitions. I love thinking about the rhythm of a show. I love making choices. I love working with preparators. I like working with my hands. The labor is good. What do I like the least? Cutting things out. It's really difficult when you have a big batch of artwork and you love them all, or you're partial to all of them, and you have to comb through and decide like what is essential. Like I said before, what benefits my argument the most. The first show that I curated that I mentioned before, I think I looked at over 500 art objects and only 25 made the final cut, and that was very, very challenging. What does my day-to-day look like? Well, my day-to-day has changed a lot because of the pandemic, but before the pandemic, although I did take on a lot of smaller curating projects, I work as an assistant curator here, so like the title says, I did a lot of assisting. I would write exhibition texts. I would research for shows. I would act as a liaison between the artists that we exhibit. Something I really like about the Berman is that because it's so small, everybody has a hand in everything. Like, even if you have a specific title like collections manager or preparator. So I feel really lucky that my relationship to curating touches so many different aspects of the museum. So after the pandemic, my day-to-day is so different. Curating has become very lonely work, actually. And it's not that there weren't lonely aspects to it before, like looking through the collection. A lot of museum work it's collaboration. Like that's the best part about it. But in the pandemic, I was working on a show, the biggest show I've done in our main gallery. And I was here alone working on it for the most part and having Zoom meetings occasionally. And my job has totally changed now. I guess I would consider myself more of a digital content creator. I film, edit, conceive, produce most of the digital content that supplements our exhibitions that are up right now. What do I want people to know about curating? I want people to know that everything is a choice. Objects don't just appear on walls. Nothing is haphazard, or if it is haphazard, it was intentional and probably the brainchild of an artist. I want people to know that everything is collaboration. It's never just one person. I want people to appreciate the choices that curators and artists make and see the connections when they come together. My most memorable experience as a curator, two things come to mind. Working on Justin Favila's Valley of Oaxaca in this very space. It was a piñata paper immersive installation, a recreation of Jose Maria Velasco's The Valley of Oaxaca, sort of an abstracted recreation because everything was made out of piñata paper. That was really meaningful to me because of the community collaboration aspect. We had members of the Ursinus community, the Collegeville community coming together. I worked long hours. I worked really hard on that exhibition, but I was working with coworkers who I love and an artist who I hold very dear to my heart, and I'm so grateful to have met. Other memory that comes to mind is working on Music for 150 Carpenters. I helped organize that exhibition, which was an orchestral piece which included 150 volunteers. However, instead of a conventional music piece, the instruments were hammers, nails, apples, lunchboxes. And it made this cacophony of sounds in the gallery. I coordinated that with the staff, but specifically working very closely with our operations manager, Betsy Witt, and the artist, Douglas Henderson. The night of the performance, I just experienced this intense catharsis. I just remember closing my eyes and listening to the show, and I was imagining like the sounds in sort of like a cloudscape, and I just cried, and I cried and cried and cried. I cried for 2 hours, and I've never experienced that from a work of art before. So that was really meaningful to me. That's the stuff I love about art museums and curating, is the human stuff. Like, how does art connect us to the human stuff? The last thing I want to say is I think it is the responsibility of the curator to decolonize the museum. Museums are places of possession. Many of the artifacts in museums are stolen, and the curator has to be aware of this and make it right. I think the curator has to uplift marginalized voices. They have to leave space for marginalized voices. The curator, they have a lot of power, and how they make things known and make people see things, and I'm aware of that. And it's something I think about a lot, and it's something that sticks with me as I work.